caution. Your paradigm is about to shift at the intersection of fact and reason. You're entering Kingston Country.
I'm Dan Kingston, and you're listening to the Dan Kingston Podcast. Is coronavirus a bioweapon? That's what we have to ask now. Harvard epidemiologist Professor Marc Lipsitch predicts about 70%, up to 70% of the world population is likely to get coronavirus within a year. Now, that's incredibly shocking. And when you have a situation where it becomes likely that the majority of the world will get coronavirus, or any virus for that matter, you have to ask yourself, is it a bioweapon? And it would be irresponsible not to explore that. You have Dr. Nancy Messonnier from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention saying it's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but more really a question of when it will happen and how many people in this country will have severe illness, talking about the real possibility of coronavirus spreading in the community in this country. And it's happening around the world already, in Italy, in South Korea, in the Middle East, and in China. And stocks are tumbling for the second day in a row. And you have questions about preparedness. Are we ready in this country for a situation with 70% of the world likely infected with a mortality rate believed to be about 2.3%? That's a catastrophic figure when you're talking about 70% of the world. Are we doing enough to prepare? A lot of people are asking that question. So before we get into that, I do want to talk about the coronavirus being a biological weapon. Now, everywhere you look, it said that this is a conspiracy theory or flat out wrong. No, nothing credible about this. Yet we know the very real possibility of the biolab being involved as opposed to zoonotic infection. And when you have anything escaping from a biolab, well, that raises questions. Could it have been some kind of designed bioweapon? On top of that, The Lancet, which is a medical journal, and a study that was reported in The Lancet, published last month, showed out of the 99 infected patients admitted to Wuhan in the beginning of this outbreak, roughly 2/3 were men. So the virus is hitting men especially hard as opposed to women. Why? Why is it hitting men harder? Of course, there's scientific explanations why. Of course, there's some precedent for coronavirus, SARS, let's say, hit men harder than women. So you can't essentially say, oh, well, look, it's a bioweapon because it hits men harder than women. But if you were to develop a bioweapon, wouldn't you develop it to hit men harder than women? Wouldn't you develop a bioweapon with a rate of transmission that is really, really high, which is exactly what we see with this coronavirus? Wouldn't you design a biological weapon that spread asymptomatically so that it would be really hard to contain, which is what is happening in the coronavirus? And so there's a lot of coincidences, especially when you look at the timing of the Hong Kong protests and you look at the timing of the trade war and the trade deal. So there's a lot at play. Now, do I believe we would launch a biological weapon against China to help our trade war? No. But could there be rogue sources within our own government? This is an idea that's been floated by High Top, who I follow on Twitter, who seems to think it is a possibility. There could be rogue elements within the government that could do something like this, take it on to themselves. And whether or not it's the CIA or a private individual or something more sinister than that, I think it's more likely that this thing was developed in China. If it is a bioweapon, my guess would be that it's a Chinese bioweapon, not this crazy, kooky story that it's coming from Canada or it's coming from North Carolina and it's bought and sold and this and that. Why? It's much more likely that it was developed in China because we know they're doing those kind of experiments. We know it to be a fact. In 2019, the State Department prepared a report. It's called Adherence to and compliance with arms control, non-proliferation, and disarmament agreements and commitments. And again, this was prepared in August 2019 by the U.S. State Department. And quote, in 2017 and 2018, the United States engaged China on issues related to the Biological Weapons Convention. What issues? I don't think they would have been happy issues. Okay, here's another quote from that report from the State Department. Information indicates that the People's Republic of China engaged during the reporting period in biological activities with potential dual-use applications, which raises concerns regarding its compliance with the Biological Weapons Convention. In addition, the United States does not have sufficient information to determine whether China eliminated its assessed biological warfare program as required under Article 2 of the Convention. So we know China has a biological weapon program. We cannot say that it was eliminated. This is in 2019, last year. Here's another quote from the report. The United States assesses China possessed an offensive biological warfare program from the early 1950s to at least the late 1980s. That's what we know for sure. And we cannot assess whether they eliminated that biological warfare program. Here's another passage from the report I want to read to you. China continues to develop its biotechnology infrastructure and pursue scientific cooperation with countries of concern. Who else would that be? Maybe Iran, which just happens to be the source of the second largest outbreak, second to China. It's Iran. And now it's spreading all across the Middle East. Did something get out of control? You know that China is studying biological situation science with Iran, according to this State Department report. At least that's what's alleged, if you read between the lines. And then you have an outbreak in Iran believed to have come from a person from China. Did it start from a lab in China and spread to a lab in Iran? I don't know, but it seems a little interesting, doesn't it? The fact that it hits China, it hits Iran. You got the timing of this with the trade war with Hong Kong. You have the fact it hits men harder than women. You got the rate of transmission is through the roof, asymptomatic transmission. And you have to ask, is this a bioweapon or is it just zoonotic? What's the simplest answer? What makes more sense, not less sense? When the bats were found 800 kilometers away, when they were not used as a food source in Wuhan, but they were used in science experiments at those Wuhan labs. We know there were accidents where bats peed on the one expert and blood from a bat got on the expert. And look, this stuff is out there. It's out in the open. And why nobody's talking about it and they're still saying influenza is more dangerous than coronavirus, well, it's criminal. And people are going to get people killed for saying stuff like that. I mean, 2 weeks ago on NPR, they were saying that influenza was more dangerous than coronavirus. And that was the point of discussion. So now stocks are tumbling hundreds and hundreds of points every day. The biggest 2-day sell-off, I believe, in the Dow Jones history. Are they still going to be talking about how influenza is more dangerous? I'm sorry. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. You have a situation where they're talking about major disruptions are going to come to this country. Major disruptions. We're talking about workplaces are going to get closed. Public events are going to get shut down. Now, we could be over-preparing, perhaps, but I think actually what's happening is we're under-prepared. We are under-prepared, and dangerously so.
This is Kingston Country.
The Dan Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Traveling with Janice and Cruise Brothers. This is a great time of year to plan your summer vacations. Lots of great travel specials for cruises and tours. Call Traveling with Janice and Cruise Brothers for all these ideas for families, groups, weddings. 480-648-3324 or email travelingwithjanice@gmail.com.
As of today, the coronavirus outbreak has over 80,000 cases worldwide, at least 2,663 deaths worldwide, 53 cases in the United States, 34 countries with confirmed cases of the coronavirus outbreak. My question is the United States ready for a potential coronavirus pandemic?
Thank you, Lisa R., for that question on coronavirus. I'm afraid that we are woefully underprepared to handle this. And it's not like we haven't had time to prepare, but the fact is that because it hasn't been reported widely on cable news, people don't see it as a threat. And so President Trump is just reacting to what he hears from his constituency. People aren't that concerned, and so he doesn't seem to be that concerned. Now, he's a germaphobe. We know that, and that's probably a good thing in this case. And we are preparing military bases, emergency rooms, but we are not doing enough. This is an all-hands-on-deck situation. If you have a situation where it spreads here, and everybody, all the experts think it is going to come here sooner or later, it's just a question of how many people get seriously sick. But if we're looking at other countries, you got to be really concerned and say, are we doing enough? I don't know. I'm afraid that we're not. Based on what I'm looking at, I'm worried we do not have enough medicine. We do not have enough face masks. We do not have enough protective gear. I believe that we should be getting as much of this stuff, an all hands on deck, a war type situation, because if we looked at what happened in China, they waited way too late. They waited too late, and it was impossible at that point to control it. So you got Senator John Kennedy. He's a Republican, by the way. And he's saying this, quote, "There's some real basic questions that the American people need answers to. How many cases do we have? Based on their modeling, how many do they think we will have? How is the virus transmitted?" Okay, he goes on. "What is the mortality rate? What's the mortality rate compared to influenza? How many face masks are we going to need? And are we working on getting more? How many respirators are we going to need? And are we working on getting more?" I'm extremely concerned. We are not hearing about this enough. And that's why you have people like Dr. Nancy Messonnier, who is coming up there and saying it how it is. I mean, really getting you some hard-hitting facts, saying this is going to potentially disrupt American life. But I believe she is doing the right thing here, because to get the president and the White House concerned, to take drastic measures, they're going to have to see a concern among the people to take drastic measures. You have thousands of people are being told right now in the U.S. to self-monitor. Thousands. And yet this is not centralized, a completely decentralized issue of nurses calling people who are believed to be at risk of having the virus. They're called every day by nurses, but there's no central tally. I mean, I'm afraid that we're starting to look like China over here, because there is very little transparency at this point about the number of infected. Now, we're not covering it up, but we're not being transparent about it. I want to see these numbers. I echo the concerns from Senator John Kennedy talking about the need for knowing the answers to these basic questions. What is the modeling numbers? What does it show us? And is this stuff being held back to protect the economy? Is it being held back to protect investors, to give them a parachute, to give people plenty of time? I don't know what's going on, but I would be highly skeptical. The stock market now and Wall Street, they're finally smarting up to it. And don't make the mistake of thinking that this is a short-term reaction to headline news. This is a reaction to a fundamental health crisis. And everybody needs to wake up to it.
Kingston Country. You've been listening to the Dan Kingston Podcast.
Dan Kingston here, asking you to do me a huge favor. Will you possibly rate the Dan Kingston Podcast on Apple Podcasts? Each new rating, believe it or not, really does have a major impact on the way Apple's algorithm recommends content. With just one quick click, You can help promote citizen journalism and end the stranglehold of the mainstream media. Together, we're going to do this. Thank you. I really appreciate your support.